Today, I'm going to talk very briefly about implementation in the systems development life cycle. If this sounds like stuff you're interested in, make sure you click on that subscribe button so that you can have access to more of my content. My name is Olumide. I am the business analysis coach. So, implementation. For those of us in Nigeria, we've had some issues with a couple of the major banks in the past few weeks. Their applications have not been working, their websites, their internet banking has been erratic, and some of them have posted messages talking about shifting to new systems. And that got me thinking about the idea of implementation in the systems development life cycle. And I wanted to just talk very briefly about that. So if you're familiar with the software development life cycle, you would know that it has 7 phases. Well, the number kind of depends on which guide you're reading, but essentially there are 7 phases. The first of them is planning. It's followed by requirements analysis, followed by design and then development, and then testing, and then implementation. The last one is maintenance. But the phase that I'm interested in today is the implementation phase. And I want to talk about the different types of implementation so that you have a good idea of what they are. So the first one that I'm going to be talking about is what is called direct implementation, or sometimes called the Big Bang approach. So Big Bang. And I think that from that name, you would get the idea that it's something that happens in a strong way. So it's direct. Essentially what it means is that maybe you had a system running before and then you stopped using that and you started using the new one. Like there were no fallbacks or anything like that. You just switched over to the new one. That's direct implementation. That is what is happening with the banks at the moment. They're switching over to new systems and they don't have the luxury of doing it in phases because banking is huge. The resources required are very many. Some of these things cannot really be implemented using some of the other methods. They really have to just do the migration all at once. So that's direct implementation. Some of the advantages of direct implementation: you have a faster implementation because you're going straight from the old one to the new one, and there is no need to maintain 2 systems simultaneously because again you're switching off the old, you're getting into the new. But some of the disadvantages of that: the risk of failure is high, because what if for some reason the new system doesn't work, or what if it has issues? And I feel that that's what the banks are facing right now. There are challenges and there's nothing to fall back on. They simply have to find out how to fix those challenges because now they've migrated and their customers are kind of stuck. So that's direct implementation. The second type is parallel implementation. Like that word implies, parallel. It implies that you have the old and the new systems working side by side. So instead of doing like you would do in direct implementation, which is essentially that you move to the new system and you would have switched off the old one, parallel implementation is that you have both of them running side by side, at least for a while. That gives you the time to make adjustments on the new system, such that if there are issues, you have some time to fine-tune, because people can always fall back on the old system. So that's parallel implementation. It reduces risk. That's the main advantage. It reduces the risk because your customers, your users get to have something that they can fall back on. But the disadvantages would be stuff like the costs, because now you're maintaining 2 systems all at once. That can be costly, and it can also require, other resources apart from financial costs. So for example, maybe staff have to maintain 2 systems, and things like that. So So that's parallel implementation. Two systems running side by side until you are ready to switch off the old one. And then there is phased implementation. Phased implementation, it takes place in increments. So you can also call that incremental implementation. Phased implementation is essentially that you're bringing in the new system, but you're doing it in stages. You're doing it in phases. So you don't bring it all in at once. In terms of risk, the risk is lower because just like for parallel implementation, this one still gives you the option of having a fallback plan. It's also such that you're not going all in at once, so you're able to manage the risk. If there are problems with one part of the system, you can get to fix that before bringing everything in. So the scale of problems per time is relatively low, and that makes it easier to troubleshoot since the changes are smaller as well. The disadvantages of that, one is it can take a long time to fully implement the new system because you're trying to do it in phases, so it can take a while. And then you have to also think about integration issues because now you're integrating stuff into existing things. So you have to think about potential issues with the integration. You're doing things incrementally, so you are adding stuff to the existing base, and that might imply integration related issues. And then another type of implementation is pilot implementation. Pilot implementation. So for pilot implementation, you roll out the new system, but you roll it out for a specific section or for a limited section of your target area. So maybe if it's for an organization, you can roll it out for a department, or you can roll it out for a section. So that's a pilot. Sometimes people confuse pilot implementation with maybe phased implementation or parallel. The three of them are not the same. Pilot implementation implies that you're rolling out for a small segment, a limited segment of the overall organization. Phased implementation implies that you're rolling out the system, but you're doing it in phases. You're doing it for the entire organization, but you're rolling it out in phases, so the features don't all come out at once. Parallel implementation implies that you have the old system and then you have the new system, and you have both of them running concurrently, at least for a while. So they're different. So for pilot implementation, the advantages of that are that you are able to also minimize risk because you're confining the problems to a limited section of the organization. So you're keeping the scale relatively small. It's also easier to use that as your test before you deploy organization-wide. The disadvantage of that is that it can be time consuming because it means that you're not rolling out for the full organization at once. You're first starting with a pilot. So you have to consider that as well. And the last type of implementation would be the hybrid. Hybrid implementation implies that you're using a combination of methods. So you're picking essentially whatever works and you're combining those methods to get the desired result. So that's it. Those are the types of implementation. One question would be that which one is the best? Well, there is no best per se. I would say that it really depends on the specific circumstances, because depending on what situation you have, a particular method might be best suited. So you have to consider things like how much risk can you afford to take. That's a very important consideration. You have to consider the costs of implementing. You have to consider how complex the system is, the system that you're implementing. What's the level of complexity? You have to consider things like the time. How much time do you actually have to spend on the implementation? Because if you don't have a lot of time, if you have to do it really quickly, direct implementation might be best. But if you have more time, you can try out one of the other methods. You have to also consider the capacity of the organization. So how much of resources can the organization afford to put into implementing the system? So that's that. Those are the types of implementation for the systems development lifecycle. Don't forget that if you would like further training for business analysis, please feel free to visit my website, businessanalysiscoach.com. I've got self-paced classes that you can sign up for, and you can also get certified. You can get certified by the British Computer Society, which is known as BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. So just head over to businessanalysiscoach.com and you can send me an email or just go through the website and you'd find all of the information that you need. And please make sure that you click on the subscribe button so that you can get more and more of my content. Click on subscribe, turn on notifications. I look forward to seeing you in my very next video. Do have a lovely day.